if you and Roger Wright go play golf, what's the scorecard look like?
Yeah, he definitely wanted you to ask that. The scorecard is always in his favor. One of these days, I'm gonna get him though, and I'm gonna make sure it's blasted amongst the world. That's always, I love playing with my dad. I feel like it's always a good time. But we joke around a lot. I think the best rounds with my dad is whenever we get my brothers involved. But we always have a good time too.
Welcome back to Podcast on Wheels. Today we've got a double treat for you. Not only do we have Mr. Kyle Wright, current Major League Baseball pitcher with the Kansas City Royals, we also have my favorite person in the world, my bride, Miss Courtney Smith, sitting across from me today. So, Kyle, welcome to the show, brother.
Yes, sir. Good to be here. Good to talk to you guys again.
Yeah, and Kyle, you joined us for the first season and was gracious enough to be there. And at that point in time in your career, you had played for the Braves. We talked about that. We talked about the World Series. You're now with the Royals. And so you're just now getting back on the mound and getting some of that going. So update us a little bit about where you're at. And then I know Courtney has some questions for you, Kyle.
Yeah, so obviously I've had shoulder surgery, basically 17 and a half months now. So which is pretty intensive shoulder surgery. So the rehab process was definitely a grind and lots of lots of this, but we're starting to really climb back up again. Back facing hitters, I would have been more ahead of schedule than I was, but of course, just to add a little bit extra time, I tweaked my hamstring I don't know, second week or so of spring training. So that basically set me back roughly 3 weeks or so, but so just had to take a little bit longer. Look at hindsight, just gave the shoulder one final little break before, we get it going again. But yeah, so now I'm facing hitters through my second live yesterday. So far ball's come out better than I would have expected. Execution has been pretty solid. Recovering better than I would have expected. So right now we're in a really good spot. Throw another live here probably in 4 days now. So just getting back in that compete mode's nice, and not always worrying about how's my shoulder feel today, or what exercises do I have today. I can just go out and be a baseball player and compete. So it's weird. It's nice to have nerves again, even though it's a live BP and it's just me and the hitter. There's nobody else in the field, but being nervous again, man, it's the best. You don't realize how much you even take that for granted before you play a game, but it's awesome. I'm happy to be competing again and trying to get guys out.
Awesome.
And I love the nerves, having the nerves as a positive, because we're gonna jump into being a competitor, because obviously to make it to any type of professional level, you have to know how to compete and crave that competition. So I love how you said that nerves it's a part of it. It's part of being a baseball player. It's part of being the pitcher, part of the competing. So that's kind of jumping into the highs and the grind. What does it really mean to you to be a competitor? So that nervous feeling, I know you crave it, but kind of expand on that.
Yeah, I think we as athletes always like to think that nerves are a bad thing when it's not true. All nerves are is you wanting to do well. That's ultimately what it is. You want to compete, you want to win, which I think that is a fantastic thing. If you don't want to win, then why bother playing? Why bother doing really anything in life if you want to be successful at it? So I think one thing I think with that is just embracing nerves and understanding that that's you getting excited, that's you wanting to win and compete. I think for me, like I said, I always knew that even before surgery, but I think you take it for granted a little bit, and sometimes you want to kind of shun it away. But now I've got like a whole new grasp of how much I enjoy competing and playing and pitching and all of it. So being nervous again, it's super exciting, and I already look forward to that same feeling in my next life. I know obviously they'll kind of come and go with the more I face hitters, and the more intense of a game it may be. But for me, it's all part of it. You embrace it. You don't have to run from nerves. They're not a bad things. Which I think for me, getting that new understanding has been really cool, and I'm going to continue to use that.
Did somebody coach that into you early about nerves and emotions and how to handle them, or is that just kind of natural?
Yeah, I think a little bit. Growing up playing for my dad, who's a coach, I think that's kind of where you got your first grasp of it. But then once I went to Vanderbilt, we worked with a sports psychologist. His name was Ken Reveza. He actually passed away, but he is, the godfather, if you will, of baseball sports psych. And so he was a guy that really, where I learned about it a lot was at Vanderbilt. And now I work with a guy who basically worked under him. So he teaches a lot of the same things. His name's Zach Sorens, and he played in the big leagues, and he's now my mental performance coach. But so now we don't talk about that stuff as much. We talk about preparation for game and how we evaluate games, but still all those things kind of, go hand in hand. And, I think it's a big part of the game is being dialed in mentally. It just allows yourself to just be free and go pitch and compete. If you're, controlling what you can control and not overthinking things or if you can, the more you can simplify things especially as a pitcher, I think the better, because it just allows you to, go do what you're naturally good at. And that's throwing a baseball and executing and making pitches.
Yeah, it's just that easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just remember my mental coach. It was because we had one at UAH with our softball team, and it was mental coach, but it was a lot of goal setting and reframing. A big goal was we would score as a team in the first probably 3 innings. And then if we didn't put enough runs up in the first 3 innings, that was it. We didn't score later innings. We had a great team and a great pitching staff, so we still won a lot of games. But when it came to like real, competing, we had to have another edge. So there was, a silly kind of gimmick thing where we passed this thing around secretly, and whoever had it, when something happened really good in the 5th inning, they were supposed to like lose their mind. We have girls like climbing the fences and like going crazy. But then we started putting up really big numbers in the back, a couple innings there, and, had a successful season. That was like a team thing, but personally, and it was more, I like to let people on base and then try to get 3 outs with bases loaded. I had a big problem with that. Or I would get 2 quick outs and be like, well, I'm having fun. Let me just walk this person so I have more batters. So I had a little bit of, some habits there that we worked through and got ahead of. So but I never really felt like there was there was a nervous or performance piece that I felt like I probably needed to get more of. It was more of a higher level, just different goal settings from our coaches. Like it's not from our actual coach a little bit, but it definitely helped. That little bit helped.
Yeah. And I think everyone's different. Like we'll cover everything possible, imaginable. And some things I'm like, this is fantastic. I'm going to use this every game before we start. And other times, like, I don't need, I'm not worried about that. I can control this part of my game, so I'm not going to worry about that. Whereas, like I said, and you see it from some people, they don't need a lick because they're just zoned out, and I mean that in a good way, and they can just compete. And some people who like to think a lot, they need all the resources to go to, all the things, so that way they can slow the game down and go pitch. But everyone's different, so whatever it is that you take that can benefit you, then do it for sure.
Absolutely. What about your mental stuff? I know you do something with the boys pretty good with their emotions.
Well, I guess if Courtney's going to put me on the spot, bro, we talk about there's 2 choices. You can either be a boss or a bitch. And I know that's not really politically correct. But and I kind of stow that. And you mentioned Ken Revisa and the things that they talk about and, going in depth there. But I want to hit you with something right here, Kyle. Did you know that you're approximately the 800th pitcher in Major League history to record a 20 wins?
I did not. I just knew I did it. I didn't know what number or who I was, but I'll take that. We're still under the thousands, so that's a good number.
That's huge, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
That's that. And I was like, you know what? I know he doesn't know that because I know who you are and what you're more about. But, to get that type of recognition and leading Major League Baseball in 22, what does that legacy mean to you? You're leaving that mark on the game.
Yeah, during the season, I didn't realize how cool a 21 season was. I think just with how, I mean, I definitely have come up with more of like, new age of analytics and statistics and what we value now as, baseball and front offices and whatnot. So I knew wins was a good thing. I knew I always wanted to get the win, not the loss, but I don't think I realized how cool it was until after I got my against, I think it was the Phillies, and seeing our manager Brian Sticker come in, and just you could just see how excited he was, the emotion on his face, and just a lot of the guys who have been around the game for a really long time. Because for them, like 20 wins was that was the thing. Winning was the stat that mattered. So I think that's when I understood how cool it was when you see how it impacted the older generation of baseball, and that kind of helped me realize, like, man, that stretches a really long way. I mean, that goes back to like 840. That's way back in history of guys that have done it. So that's when I realized just how cool it was. Obviously, I don't want that to be the only 21 season. I'd like to do it again. So I think that's moving. That's a great thing to hold on to. But that's something I'll be able to tell my kids, my grandchildren, that I led the league in wins with over 20. Ideally, we do it some more and can do some more special things other than just the one time. But yeah.
So, you and Courtney have talked a little bit about the mental side. We've talked about some other things. As far as getting into what it's like to come back from a physical standpoint, there's sometimes that, you know, we see you on TV. You're playing in front of thousands of people, but there has to be what work goes in behind the scenes, behind closed doors. And I'll let you and Courtney kind of talk about the movement pieces or different things that enjoyed or endured. I'm not sure how to ask that question.
Yeah, I think it's like both, I guess. I feel like it mostly ends up being endurance just because there's a lot, honestly, there's a lot more, days where you don't feel good as opposed to days that you do feel good. So definitely more enduring, the rehab process, and, just understanding that every day is just another step to where you want to get to. I think now I'm enjoying it because I'm back pitching, feeling pretty good, facing hitters, getting to throw all my pitches. So yeah, it's definitely both. I think, especially with the surgery I had, it was, to be quite frank, it was not an easy one. I mean, it's it's very invasive. It takes a super long time to let that capsule, that tissue, readapt. Courtney, you know all this, so I'm just speaking. But I think it's the fact that no matter what surgery you get, it's definitely possible to come back from. Obviously, I still need to get in games and have some longevity to prove that. But I'm just seeing the journey that it's been so far. I'm really happy with how it's gone, and I know I still have a lot more that I can work on and improve upon, which is good. It means I can still get better, and I feel like all those markers that I needed to hit to get back to my full potential, I've been doing. So that's what it comes down to. The biggest issue with shoulder surgery is not getting that range of motion back. It's not necessarily strength, but for me, I got all my range of motion back, which was huge. So that again, that gives me the confidence that I can continue to gain in velocity or whatever it may be. It's just repetitions and pitching. Pitching is an exercise. The only way I'm really going to get more confident is being in those extreme layback positions, and that's the only way I'm going to get stronger to continue to grow and get that velo back to where I want it to be. But even right now, we're still in a pretty good spot. Yeah, rehab. It's a very interesting process, especially depending upon I guess what you have. But yeah, it's been good though.
Right, is it's full of layers, and it's a delicate balance too, especially when you're the violent motion of pitching. It's a lot of violence happening. And I guess what was the first step as far as like what body part did you need to trust the most? Did you have any issues like with lower body? Like, if I trust my lower body more, then my upper body will help, or I got to use my lower body more so the arm does it. Did you feel like there was anything in your body you had to trust to get to full speed or get to the next process? It might be.
So yeah, I got a couple different things here. I think one, it was all just trusting the shoulder. And that's really what it came down to, is feeling confident that I could being laid back and this thing wasn't gonna tear or whatever it may be again. So it all became to trusting the shoulder. And I think throughout the whole process, I realized I got into some pretty bad habits throwing wise. I'm just getting really pushy off my back leg instead of driving and rotating. So and the reason I was doing that, basically I was kind of pushing, jumping up off the mound, was to give my arm that time to get up and try to produce the most velocity I could and give myself time to make the throw, which I started to learn that I was getting very upper half dominant. Because I was jumping, my legs are not really doing anything anymore. So one of the things that we did a lot, and I'm still working on, is doing a better job of rotating into my foot strike. I'm going to kind of same thing. I'm going to get a little nerdy pitching here, but I realized that I was landing closed. And because I was landing closed with my pelvis, then my upper half was having to make the entire throw, which in turn, it's significantly harder to produce velocity with all upper half. And I was also noticing that I was kind of pissing off my lat a little bit, pissing off, the back of my shoulder, because now I was really relying on those to decelerate totally. I wasn't getting into my left glute, my left hip. So one of the things that I started, noticing, and I did a biomechanic analysis. That way we could realize, that's how I came up with these answers. It wasn't just, I think this is it. This is all, confirmed through data. But the big thing for me was focusing on landing with my pelvis open more towards the plate at foot strike while keeping my shoulder, and like I said, I'm still working on that because it's taken like some trust with the shoulder to know that, I'm fine. This thing's not going to, nothing's going to happen. I've got to let it lay back, open, and rotate, which the better I've gotten at it, the better my shoulders felt, because I'm using my lower half. I'm using rotation to throw the ball instead of pushing and then just kind of relying on my upper body to make the whole throw. So it's kind of been fun to a certain extent. This part's been fun, like, being able to attack a lot of deficiencies that I had to hopefully, improve. Because that's the goal now, is not just to throw a few lives or throw some bullpens. The goal is to pitch and stay healthy. It's not just about getting back there. And I know that there's some things that if I can clean up, I think one, it's going to help me just be more efficient. It's going to help me kind of get that extra few miles an hour back. And I think third, most importantly, is withstanding that and staying healthy. That's the goal now. I don't want to ever be hurt ever again. This is my one, surgery in baseball, and hopefully it's the last. So for me, that's the goal, is find a way to sustain good stuff and be healthy. So for as long as I want to play. But yeah, so that's a little nerd out, and it's like I said, it's kind of, a lot of it's tough to just explain with my voice without actually showing, but that's kind of the things that I've focused on a lot. For any baseball listeners there, it's like I said, I enjoy talking about this stuff because this is what's going to ultimately make me better and be the pitcher that I want to be consistently. And it's also like I'm having to change myself a little. I'm having to reinvent myself very subtly, not completely. Still, if you watch me throw, it still looks very similar to how I threw before surgery. But if you're breaking it down, or if you're, we're working with me on a day-to-day basis, you notice it more. But it's kind of fun to really dive into the stuff and do what I can to be a better pitcher.
Oh man, I agree. It's like dialing in the fine tuning part. I mean, that's the real fun. Like you get to challenge your body on different levels, and then it's cool to be like, okay, I'm working on pelvis angle when I land instead of throw strike.
Yeah.
How far have you come? This entire journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my mentor was teaching me my assessment process and everything, he was very casual when he said, "Oh, just check their ankles. You know everything you know." And I was like, "There's no way. There's got to be much more to it." And then I kind of co-worked with him on athletes, kind of watched him do the process and understand it. And there was just so many times where it's like, okay, do these ankle strengthening, stabilizing, stretching things, and the athletes would see like tremendous results almost like about 3 to 6 weeks, which I feel like is pretty quick as far as performance results. Yeah, and it was the ankles, and I know we chatted about our ankles a little bit too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
perfect sense that toe angle on that front side. And I'm gonna, because I don't get to work with a variety of athletes, I get to work with my 3 at home, so they absolutely love it when I start checking their postures and everything. But with Brian, like we worked through like some groin because he had a pulled groin. We pulled everything out, but I actually had to start in his big toe on his left leg, which is
That's crazy.
thinking back through, like I had to get his big toe didn't function like a toe should move, right? It was kind of locked in, and people hearing this, baseball doesn't matter. Your toes aren't moving the way it's supposed to. It's going to cause problems all the way up the chain. But that's where we had to start with like toe spacers. We had to start there.
Yeah.
And we've got it all the way up where we're doing pelvis corrections because he was a catcher. So that position that he sat in for however long, and he's super muscular. So those muscles just got locked in that position, adjusting all of that. And, it really does start in that foot contact, the feet, and work its way up. Then it's kind of cool when you can highlight it, see it, and how it affects everything.
Yeah, and I think for me that is like my pelvis. That's like what gives me the trust in the shoulder. I was very locked up. I kind of would get a little jammed on my front side. So I started just working on more hip strengthening, adductors, but also trying to just get more mobile in there too. So sometimes getting hands on with the trainer, loosen me up. Some just doing it on my own. But I've noticed the more I've moved those, the better the shoulders felt because I'm just taking the stress off of it. It's weird. It's usually one thing. It's not more times than not. It's not the actual area that's the problem. It's somewhere else, and it's whatever's hurting is having to take the brunt of whatever else isn't working properly.
Yeah. Hey, just a question, because did you have any like tingles in your elbow before the shoulder got? Because that's usually what people tell me is like, oh my, it's like they may feel it residual, but it's not, especially the elbow and the shoulder.
So nothing on the elbow, but so actually I had posterior caps repair, so the back of my caps was torn, but I felt everything in the front. So that is kind of a little bit of difference. So I always thought it was here. We thought that when they went in there, it was going to be anterior, but it was posterior. But basically, I think it was just everything here was just working overtime to, make up for the inefficiencies in the back. So not to the elbow, but still front was where I felt everything, and back was the issue.
Makes perfect sense. So I know you said you struggle sometimes saying the words, but I had to teach throwing to like 7-year-olds for a long time. So my term is hip generated arm speed. If your hips are fully generating that arm speed, and the injuries go way down, the velocities go up. Throwing, pitching, hitting too.
Yeah, that was a lot of things I did. I tried to watch, guys that have been relatively. We play baseball. Injuries are going to happen. Guys throw hard. It's impossible to be healthy in any sport. So I feel like everyone should know that. But I did look at a lot of guys that throw hard and have stayed relatively healthy, and that's what a lot of them do really well. They rotate their hips and their landing with their upper half stay closed, and just creates tension through the body to make the throw instead of having to, rely on the shoulder. For me, I was creating too much tension with my shoulder, my upper half, therefore overusing it, overworking it. Just be able to create tension through the body, let that make the throw, and the arm's just along for the ride. That's kind of the what a lot of the really good guys do that throw hard and stay healthy.
That's the formula. If you can get it to all work on everywhere, yeah, get the hips to do it. But there's secrets and finesse to that. Yeah, I'm gonna get Brian back in.
So, as I was listening in there, I was like, all right, so now we're talking about Brian and his stuff. So we need to get back on Kyle. You know, but it is awesome to get to hear because as an old baseball coach, man, and being kind of not quite as old as the guy I'm going to ask you a question about here in just a little bit, but being kind of an old school coach and understanding that you're putting all this information to use because ultimately Kyle's the product and you are making a living by what your body can do. This is the best way to do it. So, the first time, and I'll tell you, your dad and I were, and Courtney looked at this picture and she said, he's going to struggle with a curveball. And I went, how do you know that? And she said, because of this and this. And your dad kind of looked because you had already been to Vandy. And I was like, I just thought he sucked. Okay. He throws 88, but his curveball's for crap. And they're like, no, this is why, because his arm wasn't here because of the limitation. Okay. So I love to hear currently, this is what the big leaguers are doing because that's what people at home are like, hey, how's Kyle doing? And the show we did last year, I go to a ballpark. Hey, how's Kyle doing? And so I wanted to make sure that we let people here in the Huntsville area know that Kyle's doing great. He's strong. He's coming back. And that won't be his only 20-win season, that we're going to get to see some more.
Yeah. And I will say, I think one thing there's still not enough of is, so I think the best coaches that I've had, they have that old school mindset, but they understand all the new things. I think a lot of times in baseball, we've got one or the other, and I don't think too much of anything is not good. I think having that old school gritty mentality, because at the end of the day, once the game starts, the old school coaches I still think are the best, because once in game, it's about getting outs. It's about throwing strikes. It's about getting outs. It's not about my pelvis wasn't rotated enough or my sinker's not moving the way it should be. It's not. You got what you got that day, and you got to go compete. So That's the one thing I will say. I'm working on this stuff. That is a point of focus. But when we have enough really good coaches with the Royals, that once the hitter's in the box or it's time to pitch, that stuff's out the window. You work on what you work on in between, but once it's game time, I don't care if you're throwing it behind your back if that's what you got that day. So I still think old school coaches are still great. That's what I'm telling you. So don't lose that at all.
Well, I appreciate that and hearing it, but you're right. At the end of the day, there is a winner and there's a loser, and there's a how do I say there used to be a hard way, now there's a smarter way to get the hard way
Yeah,
done. But I love
yeah,
that you brought it right back to that competitor that you are. You're like, hey, please hear me say, you still got to go out and you still got to pick the ball up and you still got to throw it where, yeah, you still got to win.
yeah. And I think kids don't hear that enough these days, just with how much data and analytics has taken over. And don't get me wrong, I love it. I love data. I love analytics. I think it's fantastic. I think it's the best way to help you be a better pitcher. But I think it's also important to compete too. It's not just about making throwing pitches that look cool or throwing stuff off the backstop. Yeah, it was. Yeah, you threw it 98, but it was nowhere close. I still think pitching and is important. So I think it's the marriage between the both of them is where you're going to get the best players, and I think we're going to get the most out of yourself as a player. So
All right. Well, here I got two more questions for you. What's one thing that as a major league player that you get to do that people would be like, oh, that's like, I've heard a story that a friend of mine was out in San Francisco and he saw some players riding by on some electric scooters because they didn't use their vehicles because of parking and different things. But what's something that different ballpark, something that you guys would know that, something cool that they're like, well, do they really drive to the ballpark by themselves? Do they ride in a bus? What's the transport like for that? Like, you're going to a visiting stadium.
it's like transportation. It really depends on where you're going. Like for example, a lot of guys we're playing, and I haven't done this yet, but we're playing New York Queens. A lot of guys ride the train there because it's way faster. We stay in downtown New York, a couple blocks away from Times Square, and it's really, I think it's what, like maybe 8 or so miles, but it takes you an hour, hour plus to get there. So a lot of guys just, I'm just going to take the train, and they get there, and half the time you never stop. So that's one, but most times guys just ride the bus. Every now and then guys who ride. I feel like it's different city to city, but I feel like that's New York's really the only ones where guys will do a more enjoyable trek to the field. I haven't done it yet, but just because I don't feel confident on the subway systems yet. My wife worked there for a year and she's got it down, but if I'm not with her, I don't trust myself.
I can appreciate that because I spent some time in Long Island when I was still coaching. And for a guy that grew up in Alabama to go try to figure out which one to get on and where to get off, and I would just rather pay somebody to drive me there. And
Yeah,
that's not, I mean, yeah. Oh, the last few times I've been, I'm like, I'll end up at the wrong place. It's not I don't want to ride it. I just don't know where to get off,
yeah.
So, but all right. So if a young athlete in this area is like, because for the people that don't know, where we're sitting right now is within 30 minutes of where Kyle graduated high school. And everybody here loves you, knows you, looking up to you. And for those kids that are watching that are like, hey, I want to be there one day, and you've talked about how to compete and the emphasis there. But what would you say just to those young athletes that are like, hey, I want to be like Kyle?
I think for one, I just really enjoyed playing with my friends, my teammates. So I love playing baseball, don't get me wrong, but I think for me, I always just dove into the team. And I think for me, that took the pressure off of baseball. So I was just out there having fun, playing with my best friends, and again, I'm sure kids are tired of hearing the same cliche answer, but for me, that's what it was. I was just playing high school, playing baseball with my best friends, and that took the pressure completely off. We just went out there, competed, have fun. At the end of the day, we obviously wanted to win every game, but if not, we went home and we hung out together after the game, and we were going to show right back up the next game and play hard. I think one, just dive into your teammates, dive into your friends. I think to this day, still me and my group of best friends from high school, we still got a group chat and we talk all the time. So I think having friends like that kind of keep you grounded and just make the whole experience more enjoyable. I feel like all my memories are of playing high school baseball and travel ball, or more so just all the fun things that we did and set off the field as opposed to the game. So, and again, I think that made it easier for me. I think surround yourself with good people. I mean, I get me and my buddy usually a couple times a week. We would go up to school at 6 a.m. and we would hit BP. So I think one, surround yourself with good people too, and people that want to have success just as much as you do. Again, another cliche, and I feel like when I was young, you don't realize it, but as you get older, who you surround yourself around really does matter. It's important. You're gonna find yourself doing like-minded things with people you hang out with. Find people that are fun, they have drive, they want to be successful. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to want to be successful in baseball, but if that's what it is, you just find guys who have that same drive. And I think for me that was a big part of it. And like I said, I grew up around a lot of good players and good coaches too, so that helps. I think Huntsville baseball has gotten even significantly better since I played. I feel like they're rolling guys out left and right. There's some guys in pro ball that's also made the big leagues, and some guys playing some really high level college baseball. So I think there's a lot of, guys that young kids can go watch play high school baseball that are going to be the next step, and just watch what they do. And, so I think it's really cool to see how strong Huntsville has gotten, in all sports, but definitely baseball.
Yeah. And you had a big part in that, Kyle, because I've told you this before. And for the people watching, the first time that I met you, I was umpiring a high school baseball game, and I think you were playing shortstop. Okay. And being an umpire, and I know me as a player probably wouldn't have been somebody I cared to get along with during my high school days. But I can tell you that the way you communicated with me, I was a field guy. I was like, who's this young man? Like, who's this guy? And then I meet your dad and get to know you. And then you're not here by accident. Right. I mean, this has been something that I asked your younger brother one time, I said, what is it about Kyle? He's like, he was made in a lab. Like, he's just amazing. And I'm like, he is at the same time. Kyle puts in the effort. Kyle puts in the work, and you've made this area better, man. I appreciate that. So what's something you're looking forward to this year with the Royals? I know having your friends, and you said there are some guys with the Royals that you kind of came up with and know. So it's kind of, you're doing the same thing again, right? Surrounding yourself with people that are there.
Yeah. I mean, we have a great team with a lot of really, really hungry players. Because a lot of the guys that were here, they were 2 years ago. The Royals lost 100 games, and there's a lot of similar players. Front office definitely went out and got some veteran guys that know how to win, and I think that helped a lot. But I think you just see the hunger from those young guys, and it really it spreads, man. I think for me, just looking forward to it, I just want to help the team however I can. Again, I think I don't. So I personally, I don't think I've ever taken for granted getting to play in the big leagues, but after missing out a whole year, you definitely have a renewed perspective, if you will. For me, man, just getting back out there and competing, I don't care what role. I think I can start. I think I can relieve whatever they ask me to do. I'll do it. If they tell me to go catch, I'll do that. But we might be in some problems if I'm having to catch. Yeah, so I think for me, man, I just want to go out there and play. And like I said, for a hungry team, a lot of young guys that really want to win. It's a great city, good fan base. So I think it'd be good. I think we've definitely got the talent to make some noise, and you get hot at the right time, you never know what can happen. So, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to it.
That's right. Well, as we've established, we've known each other for several years, and I was asked to ask this question, so please don't hold this against me. But if you and Roger Wright go play golf, what's the scorecard look like? What's the conversation like? And what enjoyable experience is that?
Yeah, he definitely wanted you to ask that. The scorecard is always in his favor. One of these days, I'm gonna get him though, and I'm gonna make sure it's blasted amongst the world. But no, it's always I love playing with my dad. I feel like it's always a good time. We just kind of we got to play some course out here in Arizona. It's really really beautiful desert golf. It's surrounded by cactus, rocks, and sand. So we have a good time. We joke around a lot. I think the best rounds with my dad is whenever we get some other friends involved or my brother's involved. But we always have a good time. It never gets too serious. There's every now and then a club may get tossed, not his, mine, but it's quickly. I quickly move on. It's more so just let it out and keep going.
I hear you. Well, it's good you have a place to let it out, because when you're on the mound for the Royals, you keep it very cool, like you did for the Braves, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
So,
you
but
have.
no, yeah, he definitely still wins, but I'll get him one of these days.
I hear you. And yes, he did make that request. So, Kyle, again, brother, thank you so much for your time. As we wrap up here, is there anything that I know you've had your charity event with the golf again? And what time of year do you normally host that? Is that a winter event?
Yeah, we try to do it typically once the season's over, early November. That's kind of best timing and the best weather that we can hope for at least. But yeah, we worked with Stars Nashville. Mental health is kind of our big passion. That's what they do. They work with schools, and so that's our plan. We'll do it again. So yeah, it was both years. It's been a fun time, and looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah. Kyle, well, as you know, we're rooting for you here, brother, and we'll be watching. And I'm going to tell you one more thing real quick before we wrap up. My boys, I told them, I said, hey, Kyle's going to be here to do a show. And they were very disappointed to find out it was virtual. They came out to the studio and they were standing out here. They're like, when's he going to be here, Dad? They've got your card that you signed for them. They've got it in their safe. They've got your stuff put up that you've given to them. So thanks again. But I will say, next time you're in town, I'm going to have to make that happen, because they were like, where's he?
Yeah.
So bad dad moment, but hey, we'll make it happen. So
yeah, this next offseason, we'll try to make it happen for sure. Come in there and get it done.
Well, Kyle, thanks again for being on the show. And thank you guys for watching Podcast on Wheels.